Joining us this morning with more, Inside.com founder and CEO Jason Calacanis. Josh Elman, a partner at Greylock Partners, joins us as well. Guys, good morning to both of you. We're all sort of just digesting this now, Jason, but what does it mean? Does it add fuel to the idea that they are truly serious about Project Titan or a car project?
Yeah, well, last week we found out that Project Titan was being reorganized and that maybe they were changing their focus on becoming a provider of software and autopilot and that kind of stuff. So it felt a little bit weird. Why can't they get a car out the door? Why can't they get a partnership done? And I think now we're probably finding out that they're going to buy McLaren. And then, listen, this is a very sexy car company that makes high-performance cars. And that makes sense because they could make a very compelling product with McLaren's assets and high performance and materials. It would be a very big acquisition for them, right? $2, $3, $4 billion. Who knows what the price will wind up being? But this is for sure the strongest sign we're seeing yet, aside from hiring 1,000 engineers, that we'll see an Apple car. How long will it take? I don't think we see it before 3, 4, 5 years. But you know, if you have all those Apple stores, seeing a beautiful, sexy P1 type car, hopefully an electric one, not a gas car, would be pretty amazing, and I think people will buy the car. I don't think Tesla has anything to worry about. I think that this is, again, a 4, 5, 6-year project, but this certainly starts them on second base.
But Josh, we had thought that Apple's ambitions for cars were maybe in the dashboard. It was the software. It was the way that you would actually power the car, not necessarily the body, the steel, the hard assets behind cars. Does this change your view of what Apple's ambitions in the auto industry is? And how much do you think they would prioritize this? Because $2 billion for a company with $200 billion and more in cash is just a drop in the bucket.
Well, look, I think Apple is in this really interesting position right now that they've sold, you know, 1 billion plus iPhones, kind of the luxury phone item, and they're trying to figure out what other luxury type of items they can actually expand to. A car sure seems like one. I too thought it was going to be much more of a software play, provide this very different experience, this Apple-like experience when you get into the car. But it certainly makes sense that the focus on design and staying at this very high end of quality would be where they'd want to be. And look, as you said, it's sort of a drop in the bucket to them to try to get into a $1 trillion market like the auto industry.
The way Apple tends to talk about this stuff, it makes me think, having followed the company for a while, that they really ideally like to control the entire experience from the store where the car is sold, though we know there's controversy around dealing with dealers, to selling and making the entire car itself. I mean, when you think about what Tim Cook has really accomplished, just sort of as a businessman and really as a technologist, it's the mass production of extremely intricate and powerful technology just at a scale that we hadn't seen before as far as consumer products. So if they can do that with cars as well, there's a huge amount of potential in it. We see these little moves or see glimpses of these little moves and think we know what's going on, but it sort of makes sense they'd reorganize a project as it rolls along if they're planning to incubate something and then figure out what bigger they need to buy, perhaps.
But it's one thing to buy a startup and then fold it if it doesn't end up working out or if the project doesn't proceed the way that Apple expected. To buy a company that has a brand like McLaren, you can't mess that up.
Sure you can.
Well, you shouldn't.
Hopefully you wouldn't. Give it time. Give it time.
Jason, does it? I mean, people are checking Tesla's price action today to see the level of disappointment, and it has crossed into the red. But I wonder how much people had emotionally invested in the idea that it would be Tesla or will be Tesla.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Tesla is probably, when they got those 400,000 pre-orders for the third-generation car, I think the train left the station. There was no way Apple was going to be able to pay a premium on top of Tesla's stock price. And Tesla has escape velocity now. They have a bigger vision of being an energy company, from the solar panels to putting the battery packs on and to having the car. And anybody who's been to the Gigafactory realizes the ambition level that Elon and the team at Tesla has is much greater than just cars. So, but Apple now is going to become a house of brands. They're getting comfortable with the idea, post Steve Jobs, I think, that they can buy brands and, become a steward of the McLaren brand, become a steward of the Beats brand. So we're going to see a house of brands. And I think that's a great evolution for Apple because, listen, they're not putting out all-star products anymore. In fact, they're trying to catch up to Samsung and catch up to Fitbit on their current, launch of the iPhone 7 and the Apple Watch 2. So this is a good choice for them, is to put that huge stack of cash to work buying incredible brands around the world. They were going to buy some watch brands as well. So I think they should put that chip stack to work, and this might be the beginning of something. We might start seeing $10 billion acquisitions, $20 billion acquisitions from Apple, which will help them catch up to Facebook, which obviously has no problem spending tens of billions of dollars, and Microsoft buying LinkedIn. This is what Apple needs to do, and it's a great sign for Apple shareholders, I think, that they're being this bold, if this is in fact happening.
Right, clearly. Well, let's stick with Apple. As if that weren't enough news, the EU's Commissioner for Competition, Marguerite Vestager, spoke to Sarah Eisen about the company's $14 billion tax bill. Sarah is back at Post 9 with the latest on that. Sarah?
Hey, guys. She was in New York and Washington this week to try and defend her case, where she has faced a wave of backlash against her ruling a few weeks ago, ordering Apple to pay a record $14.5 billion in back taxes to the Irish government. Europe says Apple got a sweetheart deal and that it's unfair. It violates competition rules. Apple, of course, disputes that.
Josh and Jason, back to Apple and the conversation that Sarah had with Vestager about the taxes. How much do they need to worry about these liabilities and the opportunities? I mean, it's interesting to hear from the EU on taxes, and then on the same day where they're apparently expressing interest in a British car maker.
We're sort of at unprecedented scale right now, where these companies like Apple, let alone Google and other ones, are just operating globally with their IP that's generated in one place, where they're not actually operating physically in all these other countries. And so I think we're starting to see what happens in this kind of new global multinational world, where the countries like Europe and Ireland are starting to go, wait a sec, if you're really going to operate here or say that you are, maybe we need to take a closer look. Some of the things we might have promised you a few years ago aren't really coming true. I think Apple's going to have a real fight on their hands.
Jason, wonder from your perspective on this. I mean, companies like Apple have options on where they invest, on where they go, on how they do business. Is the EU really shooting itself in the foot here by going so unilateral in these types of demands? The commissioner kept saying huge, very successful, to describe Apple, to justify the size of this fine and the taxes they supposedly ought to be paying.
Yeah, I mean, this is shenanigans all over the place. If you look, the whole concept of putting your intellectual property through multiple countries, it's shenanigans, right? But it's been an established shenanigan that has been accepted. To then go back in the EU to look at Apple's huge pile of cash and start salivating and saying, hey, let's retroactively, tax them for 10 years, it's really unfair, right? So it's the EU wants to, get some profits here, and they're going to find Google, and they're going to look at these companies that have huge amounts of war chest of capital, and they're going to start trying to extract some of it. And the people, this is all part of the trend we see here in the United States, whether it's the EpiPen or Wells Fargo yesterday, or even Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. The people have spoken. They want companies to pay their taxes. They want to see the minimum wage go up. And so we're seeing a balancing of consumer interests and corporate interests. And the corporate interests have gotten ahead. They're over their skis. This whole double Irish tax stuff, it all seemed like a scam to all of us. It's also unfair to retroactivate it. So I think this is part of the cleanup process. It'll probably be a negotiation. You'll probably see a third of a penalty. And then going forward, people will pay their taxes.
Josh, interestingly, the reason why banks don't disclose the amount of money they have in their reserves is because they don't want that to basically be where regulators start when they're determining these price tags. I'm wondering if you think that we'll see these companies stop reporting how much cash they have overseas or within the U.S. because it has been such a lightning rod issue.
Well, I think this is totally right that companies are going to try to figure out how to bury some of these profits as much as they can. Part of the challenge has been, we know the incredible profit margins that they're making on these products, what they're making on their phones, what they're hopefully going to be able to make on their cars. So we know all this cash has to sit somewhere. The U.S. is salivating to get it back and wants it all repatriated too. So I think we're just right in the middle of, as Jason called them, shenanigans, to try to figure out how the money's really going to flow back to where taxes should be paid, or where the laws are actually, right to protect this stuff.
Josh Elman, Greylock, Jason Calacanis, guys, appreciate all the insight today. We covered a lot of ground. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.